Sounds like the rain's come back again. I swear sometimes I worry I might just float away with all this rain. But I suppose if I do, you'll have to visit me every day on Dr. Plague's houseboat of horrors. Hey, I might write that down. That's not a bad idea. For now, though, welcome to Cozy Horror. With me, Dr. Plague. Let's get you situated with a warm blanket and a hot drink and somewhere to sit so you can listen to this glorious rain and these glorious stories that I have to tell today. Let's start things off with a real banger, as the kids do say. We'll be hearing today about the diets of a very specific something. A specific something that features a lot in horror these days. So, brought to you from the dark and twisted mind of A.P. Clariot, let's hear about how dolls don't eat.
The dispatcher said 2 kids, a boy and a girl, showed up on a lady's doorstep. Lady said the kids wouldn't talk or give their names. She gave them milk and cookies and sent them to rest in her bed because they looked tired. No children had been reported missing, but it was late, so the dispatcher thought the parents probably didn't know their kids were gone. No problem. Not my first call about kids that walked out the front door because they wanted to play. At least it wasn't winter. I drove to the house on the outskirts of Bridal Veil Lake. It looked like another farm sold off for condos that were never built. A bunch of wild fields and dirt surrounded the lady's house. It was remote and dark, and I wondered if she felt comfortable living alone out here. That knock in the middle of the night must have been a shock. I announced my presence and knocked lightly. "Hello?" An old woman, the lady, answered. "Hello?" "Hello, how are you doing tonight, ma'am?" "Been better. They're in the bedroom, sleeping, I think." She stepped inside and let me in. I saw 2 shapes beneath a quilt in the darkened bedroom. "There was no one else? You didn't see anybody?" She shook her head. "Were they injured? Scared?" "No, just shy. Really shy." She nodded towards the kitchen, which I could see from where I stood, not being a big house. "They hardly ate." There were 2 neat piles of chocolate chip cookies beside full cups of milk. It all looked completely untouched. The sight made me antsy. She said they didn't eat much. They ate something, but not a crumb had fallen on the table. Nuh-uh, I have 3 kids of my own. I never saw them leave a cookie intact at all. Something really bad must have happened to those children. "Hey, kids," I said quietly from the doorway of the bedroom. I didn't want to startle them. "You awake?" No answer, but I had to check on them. There was only a lamp for the room, and it barely lit anything. 2 small shapes lay with their bodies and heads covered with the quilt, completely still. "I'm a policeman. I'm here to help you. You don't have to be scared." I waited, but still nothing. "I'm going to pull off the blanket very slowly, just so you can see me, okay? Then you can put it right back if that makes you feel safe." Nothing. They didn't move a muscle. I prepared for the worst and pulled off the quilt. Their eyes were black, shiny, lifeless. Jesus! Because these were not living children, but full-size dolls, complete with clothes and realistic hair. Only the eyes and their plastic faces looked immediately fake. What the hell? I stomped out, admittedly pissed. The lady waited in her living room chair. "Is this a joke?" "Excuse me?" "Those aren't real kids. They're dolls," I said. She seemed confused. "I beg your pardon?" I took a breath and tried to calm myself. "Ma'am, are you on medication or—" "Jesus Christ, save us!" She got up and went to the bedroom. I shouldn't have let her see. The lady fainted at the foot of the bed. I called it in, and everybody had a good laugh about the dolls. Except for me. The lady had been prescribed blood thinners and a nasal spray for seasonal allergies. Unless she did other non-prescribed drugs, she had nothing hallucinogenic in her system. That meant she probably had a tumor or dementia or something. Gas leak could have also been a possibility. I mulled over those details while I escorted the ambulance to the hospital. She wasn't conscious for long, but didn't fight my suggestions to see a doctor. "Thank you," she said from the stretcher, squeezing my hand just before the paramedics wheeled her into the ER. I nodded. I didn't know what to say, but it was my job to help. I followed them in. Sometimes doctors want to ask questions. The cafeteria called to me. 4 more hours till the end of my shift. Coffee and a sandwich seemed prudent. I hardly touched them. The walkie crackled. There had been an assault at the hospital. Obviously, I responded. "Someone's been attacked," dispatch said. "The nurse that called wasn't very clear," and she hung up. I got up from the table about the same time a doctor descended the steps into the food court and shouted something incomprehensible. When he got close, I grabbed him by the shoulders. "She's dead. Gone. He killed her," the doctor said. It took a bit for me to understand. I'll summarize. The old lady I'd escorted to the hospital had been murdered by another patient. A young man suffering from unmedicated schizophrenia. He'd been brought into the ER after being hit by a car. "I thought he was sleeping," the doc had told me. He sat on the floor with his head in his hands. "Oh God, her head. He damn near cut her head off." Apparently, he walked down the hallway with it. Then he sat down and chatted with staff until the police arrived. I never left the food court, so I was spared the scene. Still messed me up. She thanked me. I'd sent her to her grisly death. Tragedy. That's what everyone, including my therapist, said, and I eventually agreed. I believed it. For years, I didn't think about those dolls unless someone brought them up. The old woman had been suffering some kind of delusion. No point in finding out what exactly. Probably wasn't even possible. Then, I got another call. "What? What did you just say?" The dispatcher didn't know about the kids and the dolls. That was half a decade ago at this point. "Can you hear me?" "Yes. North side. Gentleman says 2 kids showed up on his doorstep. No missing children reported tonight." "A boy and a girl? The kids?" I asked. "Yeah, how'd you know?" I didn't explain. "I'm on it, but send more constables, please." So many similarities to the previous tragedy. The time of year, the wrong side of midnight, the kids gaining entry to the home. Except that hadn't happened last time. They were dolls, I reminded myself. I would have to go to the house in the posh side of town and find actual kids there. Then I'd do my job and get them home. Fear against resolve, I gripped the steering wheel too tight and my fingers went numb. Big, dead hot dog fingers trembled when I got out of the cruiser in the huge driveway. No lights were on in the mansion at the top of the hill. I'd hoped the other constables would have arrived, but I was alone again. It took me a few minutes to calm down and not call dispatch for an ETA. As I approached, I could see the front door had been left slightly open. The flashlight revealed a big foyer, enough to fit a house. Since there hadn't been a crime reported, I felt confident to call out to the owner. "Hello?" An echo replied. The place really was that big. "Bridal Veil Lake PD. Your front door's open, sir." I rang the doorbell and waited a bit, but nobody showed. I don't know why I didn't call dispatch or wait for another constable. The only reason I went in, I think, was because I had to know if history would repeat itself. "I'm coming in." Switches were dead. No power. The grand staircase wrapped the foyer in a broad embrace, and in the center, they were there, propped up beside a headless storyteller. First, I didn't understand, and I tried talking. "It's gonna be okay," I said to the headless man. He'd been posed with an oversized Grimm's fairy tale book between his thighs and arms. Before each of the black-eyed dolls, set up to appear as attentive children, a tall glass of milk and a bowl of chips had been placed and left untouched. I choked out a gasp. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. How could the dolls be here? Attempts to draw my firearm and use my radio went about as well as you can imagine. The gun hit the marble floor and communicated nothing of use to dispatch. Maybe that was good. I might have shot the other constables when they showed up. They found me on my knees and hysterical. I kept pointing at the dolls. They thought I meant the headless victim. "It's going to be okay," one of them said, and it felt like I'd said it, or this constable had been cloned from my cells. Funny the place as a shattered mind wonders. "Okay?" I asked. I don't remember much about that. I went to the hospital. They had to sedate me. I wouldn't stop talking about the dolls. Olive and Matthew, my therapist said. He'd come to visit and explained what had happened. "It's a terrible coincidence," he said. "Those dolls are the same, yes, from the last incident. Apparently they didn't belong to the woman who passed." I don't know why this information horrified me. Well, who the hell do they belong to?" I shouted. "It's all right," he said. "It's not entirely what you think." It really pissed me off. "Look, just explain it then." The dolls weren't known to the relatives. They claimed the old lady who had been decapitated didn't like dolls of any kind. She found them creepy. Your colleagues put them into evidence for lack of a better option. Then they were sold at auction. And the rich guy bought them. No, but somebody did. And that person, well, they're the killer, I'm afraid. A man was discovered in the mansion basement, covered in blood, with the head of the owner. I thought you said it'd be all right. The man was mentally ill, but he bought those dolls. Maybe he even called about the kids. Do you see what I'm saying? Some kind of copycat killer? He shrugged, his bony shoulders in the tweed coat. It's the only thing that makes sense. Perhaps he knew the other schizophrenic man that killed the woman who thanked me. The important thing to note is that nothing supernatural is occurring. The therapist smiled. What? It's an unfortunate coincidence. I mean, that bullshit smile twitched. I've been around long enough to know when someone's pulling a con. I never thought it was supernatural. Why did you say that? I asked. He chuckled nervously. An unfortunate choice of words. I didn't mean to imply that. How do you know the names? The names? Of the dolls, I said, before attempting to get out of the hospital bed. Handcuffs held my wrists. The sedatives had prevented this observation until the urge to punch the therapist moved my body. What the hell is going on? Why are you telling me this? You're not from the department. What is happening? He backed away towards the door. Calm down. Killer named them. He kept saying the names over and over. The inspector contacted me. She thought it best I talk to you. I agreed. Bullshit. He suddenly went mute, his lips mouthing the words, "Help me," over and over. His eyes darted to the little window in the door. At the same time, a shadow passed across his face. The therapist shivered and sniffled back a tear. "You should run," he said, his last words. All at once, the man collapsed. "What the... Help! Help!" I shouted. The nurse came in and did their thing, but he was gone. I asked him if he was gone. They stopped trying to revive him, one of them confirming his death. How had he died? A real tragedy, another unfortunate coincidence. The deceased therapist had an unknown aneurysm that just happened to trigger while he begged for help and a shadow crossed the window. It was all bullshit. I took his advice. After my wife picked me up from the hospital, I Told her I'd taken early retirement. She looked relieved, until I told her we needed to leave Bridal Veil Lake. I purchased a cottage up north on the Oxbow Lake. My family didn't come. Who could blame them? I didn't think they were in danger until I learned everybody is, and there are no safe places. They came on the third night. At first, the knocking struck too softly. Thought I'd imagined it. Then it became more persistent, more rapid. I didn't move from the recliner or even lower the footrest. Just watched the door and did my best not to breathe too loudly. The knocking continued with desperate urgency. Then tiny fingernails scratched at the door. Soft weeping followed that. A child for sure. I could no longer be idle. I went to the window and peeked through the curtain. The expected pair, Olive and Matthew, wept in the gloom on the stoop. They weren't dolls this time. They were kids, flesh and blood, and human. I relented and opened the door. The very image of the dolls looked up to me. Misery and fatigue had captured the innocence from their face. I know what an overtired child looks like. This wasn't that. The little boy and girl hadn't rested in days. They swayed on their feet, avoiding collapse by way of fear or something greater. I just didn't know that yet. I'm not crazy. I don't believe in ghosts or whatever this was supposed to be. I hadn't been drinking anything but pop, and there was no gas leak in the cottage or monoxide detectors would be going off. The kids were real, and they were scared. So was I. I grabbed their arms and basically tossed them behind me and into the living room. It was dark on Oxbow Lake with a million places to hide. I shut the door and threw the bolt. Olive and Matthew clutched one another by the recliner. What's going on? Who are you? How did you get here? They stared, but not at me or anything. Both were underweight and filthy. A combination of urine and stale sweat emanating from their simple clothes. Go to the couch and lie down, I said, completely aware of the pattern I was fulfilling. I went to the kitchen and grabbed some apples and cheese. Set it down on the coffee table. Eat, I said. Neither would look at the food. Eat, I said louder. They had to eat. It felt crucial. If they ate, then they were real, because the food would be gone, and it seemed like tangible proof of our existence. Olive yawned. Matthew's expression contorted with scorn, while his bottom lip trembled. He seemed angry with her. She looked ashamed. Both started to cry again. What the hell happened to you? I dialed 911 and went through the process of summoning the police. The dispatcher thought I was crazy when I demanded a severe response. You'll be lucky to see a constable within an hour, sir, she said. You're so far away. Couldn't argue with that, but I tried anyway. I'll be dead before that. Something isn't right. I told her about the dolls and my time with the BVLP. She listened intently because that's what she was trained to do. Talking was good. Talking meant life and focus off of whatever she might believe I could be capable of. The call hadn't gone well, in other words. I'd simply cast myself as crazy, a possibly dangerous suspect. I hung up. Maybe they'd get here fast because of the kids. Maybe I'd be beheaded long before a hope of rescue. The kids leaned into the cushions, closed their eyes, and immediately fell asleep. No bites had been taken of the food. I got my gun from the bedroom. When I returned, the dolls were beside them. All 4 kids could be mistaken for sleeping children. A tall, disheveled man stood by the peeled screen of the open door. Only his fingernails, bitten and jagged, caught the edge of the lamplight. Shadowed lips muttered gibberish at first, but then his words became clear. Dolls don't eat. Dolls don't eat. Dolls don't eat. I aimed. He lunged, and I fired. He staggered, but not before wrapping his large hand around the barrel of the gun. I put another bullet through him, yet he didn't fall. With surprising strength, he smacked me across the face, and I dropped the gun. He retrieved it, and somehow our positions in the living room were reversed. He stood near the couch. The real kids had run away. Only their simulacrums remained. I stood near the expertly sliced screen of the front door. The man's narrow head resembled a crescent moon. He appeared confused by the blood exiting his body as he struggled to level the gun. I wasn't about to wait around for him to figure it out. I leapt through the open window as a bullet shattered the glass above my head. My ass hit the dirt, and I tore off up the pitch of the forest, figuring I'd hide somewhere until the police arrived. For a while that worked. I lay in the midst of some thorny brush, scratching myself up good, until time enough said the man had to be dead from blood loss. I endured the escape from the brambles, crawling until something firm pressed between my shoulder blades. "There you are," said a voice, impossibly calm and smooth. "Don't move. I have you. The blade is sharp, and I've done this before." I did as he said, and remained as still as my fear would allow. "Of course, you understand something about it now." When I remained silent, he ordered me to answer, punctuating the request with the tip of his knife. "You make them knock on the door in the night. They're supposed to be like dolls, and if they're not, then the kind caretakers have to die. Olive and Matthew must become the same as their dolls. Exactly the same." "Why?" The knife point penetrated slightly. "That's not for you to know. We're only here because of bad luck. You happened upon 2 instances of the training. They were so little that first time. They're older now, but they don't look it. We don't let them grow much." "You cut off that woman's head in the hospital," I accused. The knife pressure relaxed a little. "Perhaps I was wrong, and you don't get it." But then I did, and resumed tension forced me to reveal everything. "You didn't kill that woman. You didn't kill the rich guy. And you aren't going to kill me." The moon-faced guy had been a ringer for the murderer, just like the other 2. Where did he find so many mentally ill people to take the fall? He'd need access. He'd have to be a doctor of some kind. Or a therapist. "You're alive, so you didn't die in the hospital. No aneurysm. How's that possible?" The therapist laughed. "Elementary, my dear Watson. I made up a story for the nurses. Told them you were dangerous and obsessed with me. I needed to cut contact with you, and, while certainly dramatic, they were all too willing to help out a colleague. You wanted me to go far away. I hoped you would, but never thought you'd be so dense as to choose yet another perfectly isolated location for me to work. You would have been much safer in your home." I was too scared to feel stupid. "Now, we're going back to see Olive and Matthew. My poor slave is likely dead, so it's my turn to cut, and that's fine. I'm out of practice, and there's no need to rush." "Why let the victims contact the police?" "The children have to see that no one can help them. They're mine. Makes it more fun, too." "But why the dolls? You're leaving a trail." He snickered. "Less than breadcrumbs. Only you've connected 2 of the scenes, and I've left dozens over the years. Granted, the last one was dramatic. I couldn't help myself. I wanted Olive and Matthew to see what happened to good people when they disappoint me." I thought of Olive's yawn, and how hungry they must always be. One of them ate. The knife pierced my skin, and I gasped and writhed. Dolls don't eat. Now get up, into the house, and... The distant thrum of an engine filled the otherwise perfect quiet of the night. Noise travels easily across the water, so we waited and listened. When it became clear that a vehicle was approaching, he drew in a sharp breath and exhaled slowly, calming himself. Well, someone's coming. It happens. You gonna kill me? The pressure of the knife tip evaporated like the presence of the psychotic therapist. I leapt to my feet and threw a wild punch into the dark. Nothing but air swept over my knuckles. Coward. I won't keep quiet. I'm not afraid. I lied badly. I'll find you. I'll find those kids. You hear me? I'm coming. Olive, Matthew. He chuckled, already some indeterminable distance away. Good luck. Tell anyone you think will care, or will believe you. Headlights bounced down the narrow dirt road. The front door of the cottage opened and filled with the therapist. I screamed and rushed him and realized my next mistake too late. The man wasn't the therapist, but an off-duty park warden, keenly aware of his surroundings and the clumsy charge of an old wounded cop. He flipped me with some kind of judo. I landed across the coffee table on the untouched food, facing the black-eyed dolls. A pair of cuffs came next. I ranted about the dolls and the therapist and the children, but to no avail. They found the moon-faced martyr crouched by the broken window. Even dead, he still appeared confused. The warden used his cell to call for more support. The dispatcher had only called him because she knew he lived near Oxbow Lake. I told the story so many times and begged them to look for the therapist and those kids. Hours later, someone must have called him because they came back with another unfavorable fabrication. The therapist had never left Bridal Veil Lake and answered the call from Huntsville police on a landline at his office. He must have drove back, I said. But Huntsville and Oxbow Lake are roughly 5 hours away from Bridal Veil Lake. I'd been questioned for 6 hours. He also told us about your condition. I laughed. Sure, of course he did. But what about the break-ins and the dolls? Constables looked at one another. We asked about that. He says it's possible, perhaps even likely, given your trauma, that you took those dolls from evidence. That's where they were after your last discovery. You had access and a reason to dwell on them. A reason? They were choosing their words carefully. What about the intruder? He's a local, an addict, really ill. He's been arrested for breaking into cottages before. He usually does it to empty ones. You just moved to Oxbow. Even with lights on and the vehicle out front, he probably didn't understand it was occupied. You surprised him. I surprised him? I said incredulously. After more protests, I was released and told to be grateful. An investigation would follow, of course, but no charges laid unless something more incriminating was found. It won't be, I said bitterly. The constable walked me out of the Huntsville station, shaking his head and walking away. Man doesn't know how lucky he is. Before I could object, the door shut. I packed my stuff and raced home. I didn't have my gun, of course, but I figured he wouldn't be armed at his office. If he was, it'd be with a knife. In a fair fight, I'd take it and cut his damn head off. Ignoring the protests of his secretary and the man seated in the treatment room, I found him. He appeared alarmed, scared. What's the matter? What? Didn't expect to see me again? I moved closer to his desk and he stood up, backing away to the large window. We were on the 5th floor of the building. Where are they? Who? I braced my foot against the desk and pushed it slowly until his legs were trapped against the sill. Olive and Matthew. I don't. He yelped when I pushed harder. I swear, the police in Huntsville, they called. I understand something happened up there, but I can assure you, you died in the hospital right in front of me. He looked to the other man in the room, his patient. I didn't even visit you in the hospital. I'm clearly not dead. Your PTSD must have caused a psychotic break, and liar! We argued more, but the BVLP showed up, and I was strongly encouraged to leave, which I did. I refrained from telling him this isn't over, because then I'd be arrested. He already knew. He was counting on it. I went home next and tried to talk to my wife and family. He'd called them first and told them to be careful, told them to call the police if I started behaving erratically. My story, of course, fell into that category. Can't stay here, my wife said, and it hurt to know that she wouldn't believe me, and never could. I left without argument. Found me later in the park that night. The nervous demeanor had been left behind for his patients and the rest of the world. He lit a cigarette and asked if I wanted one. Son of a bitch, I said. He exhaled a plume into the air. So now you understand. How I'm about to kill you? Sure. I had nothing to lose. They're dead if I am, he said, completely calm. Seems like I'd be doing them a favor. He pulled a small pistol out of his coat. No one would be surprised if I carried this and shot a crazed attacker. What do you want? I had nothing left to give him anymore. No one gets away. They have to know. So, you gonna kill me? Eventually, yes. I will come and we'll finish what we started. They'll knock in the night and you'll answer the door, let them in, and offer them food. Which they won't eat. He nodded. Because they're dolls. If they're not by then it'll be over. I'll find others, but I think they'll do fine. Tell me why you're doing this. I'm as good as dead anyway. He held his cigarette in clenched teeth, and then he smiled. You'd be shocked how much one will pay for a doll of mine. Quite shocked indeed. That's not why you do this, I said. Not enough of me remained to shed a tear. I felt hollow, dead already. I couldn't be shocked anymore. When they knocked, I would open the door. I'd try to help them, though it seemed futile, and failure was almost assured. He backed away until confident that I wouldn't follow. I stayed in the park the rest of the night, but moved into the motel where I currently live the next day. Now I wait. I'm typing this out and putting it out there, so maybe when I'm gone, when I'm headless, someone will look for those poor kids and give them something to eat. That's my last low hope, at least.
Ugh, God. I really hate stories about dolls, but they're also extremely creepy, and the horror genre's full of them, so I guess other people are creeped out by dolls as much as I am. Moving right along to another classic of the channel, let's hear a piece about you guys' second favorite thing to gripe about, which is my treatment of cats. I really do love cats, I swear, and the fact that so many of them seem to meet a grisly end here is just circumstance. But let's hear a little bit of a different story today about our feline friends. Brought to you by Flamel777. I remind you, don't go feed the cats. For context, my mom has always been a little crazy. Never drowned me in the bathtub crazy, just a little off. Like sometimes, she was living in a different world than the rest of us. Like, when she looked at you, she knew in her heart that you were less real than her. I remember being really little
and walking into her room to find her crying over a heap of her clothes on the ground. She had scissors in her hand, and she was cutting out every spot of purple she found. "I can't see it anymore, Cassie," she said through the sobs. "I can't see the colors I'm supposed to see anymore." I went and hid in my room after that. When my dad came home, he found me locked in my room and asked me what was wrong. I explained what had happened with Mom, and he just sighed and went to talk to her. What I couldn't explain was that I hadn't locked the door because I was afraid of her. I had locked it because it felt like an added barrier between myself and the reality that my mother wasn't okay. When they divorced, I don't remember any particular incident that broke the camel's back. It felt more like an inevitable conclusion that we had all accepted for years by the time it finally happened. What I do remember is listening to my dad read off a list of the big crazy moments from their marriage. Some of them were a surprise to me, like him coming home to find her hiding in a closet with a knife. Most of them, though, I remembered all too well. So when the judge looked at me and asked if what my father was saying was true, it was all I could do to nod back at her. Needless to say, my dad got custody of me. Even at 12, I knew that, regardless of his case, there had still been a chance of things not going his way. Afterwards, we went to Sullivan's and ate our weight in ice cream sundaes. I knew that it wasn't easy for him to raise me alone, but I also know that he was doing his best. My father was a 46-year-old middleware technician when he chose to become a single parent. He worked long hours for little pay, but still found time to tutor me in math and come to my track meets. He was patient. He was gentle. He was my hero. But all of that is just a lead-up to my story, right? It turned out that a few months ago, my mom got in contact with my dad. She said that she was getting treatment, that she wanted to make reparations. She gave him the number of her psychiatrist, who my dad promptly called. The man on the other end of the line assured my dad that his ex-wife wasn't the same person from 4 years prior. He said that she had changed, and that she was getting better. He promised that getting closure with my dad and me was vital to her healing. At first, Dad refused. He was convinced that no amount of medication or therapy would change the woman who had haunted him and his daughter all those years. Eventually, though, he met her. He says it was just to get her off his back, to put the final nail in the coffin. Instead, he realized that she really was acting different, more lucid, more stable. They met a few more times, and with each meeting, he became more and more convinced that she had gotten better, that this time it would be different. When he walked into the house after seeing her, I couldn't tell what he was feeling. It felt like some kind of exhausted hope, the kind that shouldn't still have a pulse, kind of undead yearning. He needed help. I'd known that for years. He was working himself to the bone trying to take care of both of us. When I'd been born, my dad had signed up to be a part-time team member. Now it was just him and the growing shadows under his eyes. When he gently asked if I wanted to see Mom again, I nodded enthusiastically. Not for her or me, but for him. "It is so good to see you, sweetheart." Those were the first words she said to me when she sat down across from me at McDonald's. "I can't begin to apologize for everything I must have put you through." She looked better. I think after all those years, my memories of the way she acted and the way she made me feel had blended together into a flat nightmare. The woman squeezing my hand wasn't scary. It even felt appropriately motherly, though it made my skin itch. We met occasionally for months. We were alone once or twice when my dad had to step out for a work call. When we were, she would tell me about her group therapy, about all the friends she was making. She told me that it took her so long to realize that her biggest problem was self-isolating. It drove me crazy, being alone, she said. But it's okay now. Now I'm not alone. Eventually, my mom asked Dad if I could stay with her overnight. He was clearly uncomfortable with the idea and told her that he'd have to think it over. All I could think about was the work retreat, the trips with friends, all the times that my dad had missed out on living his life to take care of me. All for me. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, if we got to a place where my mom could take on even a little bit of the burden, that he might have his life back. So I told him that I wanted to go. I begged him to let me stay with her. Eventually, he agreed. "I'll be here to pick you up at 7, he said, as he pulled my suitcase out of the car. He picked me up from track and drove me straight to the cramped apartment building where my mom lived. "On the dot. If you need me before, promise me that you'll call, okay?" I promised him, offering a pinky when he gave me a stern look. He locked it with mine and took a deep breath. "Your mother's trying," he said. "I can appreciate that. I can even respect it. But I will drive my car through a front door if it means protecting you. Understand?" I laughed at the image of his scuffed Nissan hatchback smashing through the bricks and the drywall. I squeezed his hand. The evening was fine to start with. Her 2-bedroom apartment was neat and tidy, if a little small. It had a smell, too, like the ghost of something rotten hiding in the walls. But she let me put whatever I wanted on the TV. She even brought popcorn and soda for us to eat on the couch while we watched a police procedural. When I heard the oven timer ding, I asked her what she was making, and she stood up to go check on it. "It's your favorite, honey. Tuna mac." I felt the heat drain out of my face just a little. Tuna mac wasn't my favorite. I don't think I'd ever eaten it before that night. But I told myself to shrug it off. It had been years, hadn't it? It was all right for her to have a little misplaced memory. That alone didn't mean that anything was wrong. The phone buzzed with a text from my dad. "All good?" he asked. "You're such a worrywart," I responded, after giving his question a thumbs up. We ate at the table as the procedural show wrapped up. I felt like we should be talking, sharing, but there wasn't much to say, really. The absence of conversation stretched between us like a tightrope, but we didn't dare step onto it. As I scraped the last bit of tuna mac from my bowl into the trash, Mom told me that she had picked out a movie she thought we'd like. I agreed to it and sat on the couch as she put the disc in. It was a strange movie. Scary, but not in the way that a horror movie is scary. In the way that a nightmare is scary. Like everyone around you knows something that you don't. It followed a woman with amnesia trying to understand what had happened to her. At a certain point, I got a little too weirded out. The strange dream logic of the movie was like a headache I couldn't shake. I pulled out my phone and started to scroll through social media, trying to do so in a way that Mom wouldn't noticed. I shouldn't have worried. She was so enthralled by the movie that she was leaning expectantly forward, her eyes full of excitement and hunger. Just over halfway through, however, she suddenly grabbed my knee with an intensity that made me jump. I looked up at her to find that she was still looking just as intently at the TV. "Watch this. This part's my favorite," she said. I looked up at the screen to find the main character holding each other in bed, the sexual tension escalating rapidly. I felt my cheeks flush. I know how it feels to see a sex scene with your parents in the room, but this one was different. My dad always got a little uncomfortable in a way that made my discomfort feel more normal. He would usually fumble with the remote as he tried to skip through. With him, it was something to laugh about, a running joke between us. My mother's fingers digging into my skin as she commanded me to watch these two women going down on each other felt wrong, though. She shouldn't be touching me, shouldn't be encouraging me to watch. She shouldn't have that wild hunger in her eyes. I knew in my head that my mother had never been violent and never tried to hurt me. But with her one hand on my knee, I couldn't help imagining the other one holding a knife behind her back. I felt like I was going to throw up, my throat quickly closing. I don't want to watch this, I finally blurted out. I don't think the words were even all the way out of my mouth before the TV flashed to darkness. The remote was already in her hand, like she'd been waiting for me to say something. Okay, honey, I've got the spare room all made up for you, but before we call it a night, I need to feed my friend's cats. Can you come with me? I wouldn't feel right, leaving you all alone. She held her hand out, beckoningly to me. The hunger was gone from her eyes, leaving just the model calmness she'd had for the last few months. How long will it take? I asked. I'm pretty tired. Oh, just a few minutes. I promise, honey. She looked so sincere that not believing her words would have been like spitting in the face of God. I'd be a bad daughter, a terrible daughter, if I didn't trust her. Of course, I see it now. I see that a person trying to earn back their trust wouldn't act like they had never done anything wrong. A person trying to be better would make allowances for the pain their actions had caused. For her to look at me with the eyes of a mother that had never hurt or scared me should have been the first sign that she was living in a reality different from mine. But I didn't. I couldn't see that then. So I got in the car. My stomach started churning after 15 minutes on the road. I tapped my foot on the interior carpet, feeling the moments of the car trip slip on and on. You said this wouldn't take long, I asked eventually. Oh, silly, she responded. I meant feeding the cats wouldn't take long. No, my friend lives a little bit out of town, but we're almost there. Don't worry. She turned the radio up after that, a pop station that kept fading in and out of static. I could feel my body trying to take a quicker, faster breath and tried to wrestle my panic away. I tried sending my dad a quick checking-in text as we turned off the highway, but the phone buzzed a moment later to tell me the text could not be sent. By the time we pulled into the snaking gravel driveway, we'd been driving for about 45 minutes, and the radio was a hornet's nest of static. To call the place a house was generous. It was a cabin nestled in some deep woods on the outskirts of town, the kind where you can just tell that the owner declined electricity and running water for the sake of independence. Oh, sweetie, they're just gonna love you, Mom said as she turned the car off and dropped the keys into the cup holder. Then she got out and closed the door. The cats? I asked, the still warm interior of the car. The inside of the cabin was no better than the outside. When I walked in, my mom was already holding a long neck lighter to a lantern, casting a dim and gloomy light around the place. The rug on the hardwood floor was moth-eaten and ragged. The rotten coffee table looked like it was ready to fall any second. The old couch was gray and muted, and I didn't want to find out if that was sun damage or dust. So, your friend lives here? I asked slowly. I gotta go get some food from the shed, she called cheerily back at me, not answering the question as she stepped out the back screen door. I looked around me. No bowls or cat food, no scratching posts, not even any claw damage on the old couch. In that moment, standing in the dim light of the strange place, an unwelcome thought popped into my head. The storybook image of Hansel and Gretel being led into the woods by their father so that he could abandon them. She's not going to leave me here, I told myself. That would be crazy. The memory of her cutting the purple from her clothes was my only rebuttal. I listened closely to the silence of the night, sure that I would hear the sounds of feet on gravel, the sound of the engine turning over. Instead, through the overwhelming silence, I heard a shuffle, the creak of a board, the sound of someone trying to stay still, trying not to be perceived. Did she double back? Is she going to try to scare me? Why would she do that? I jumped when the screen door slammed open, admitting my mother and a 25-pound bag of dry cat food. Hungry cats, I muttered. Cats? She asked. I saw such genuine confusion on her face that it made my eyes well up with tears. The cats? That's what we're here to feed, right? I said in a small voice. Oh, hungry cats, she laughed. Sorry, I misheard you. Yes, very hungry cats. Hungrier than you think. I helped her move the bag to the porch, where she flashed the screen of her phone around until she found a grimy dog food bowl tucked beneath the rotten benches. There we are, she said. She haphazardly tore the bag open and spilled the kibble into the dusty bowl. So, we can go now, I asked. No, sweetie, she said, turning to me with confusion. We have to wait until the cats come to eat. Don't you know anything? Oh, okay, I said, my body beginning to shift and tighten in a way I'd consciously forgotten. The knowledge that the person in front of me was not living in the same reality as me shot through me like pain. The awareness that the wrong word would have my mother ripping my throat out with her teeth shook me. So, what's your friend's name? I asked. What do you mean? Her eyes were no longer on me. They were on the tree line, tracing the shadows between the trunks. Your friend, the one who owns the house. Yes, it's his house. He doesn't come by much anymore, but he told me I was free to visit whenever I wanted. I just had to feed the cats when I did. She turned to look at me, but I knew that she wasn't seeing her daughter. Her eyes drifted around me like she was evaluating a statue or a cut of meat. I looked away from her instinctively. I traced the same trees with my eyes, knowing that her unrelenting stare was on me all the while. Out of the corner of my eye, however, I caught movement. I concentrated on it. Without looking, I realized that I was seeing the shed where the food had been. The roof had caved in, like the victim of a violent crime. The door was hanging off its hinges. And there, poking out from behind the rotten mass of the shed, was a figure, a gray form against the shadowed backdrop of the woods. It loomed from the darkness like something was curious. I know we might be here a while, waiting, my mom said, her eyes still on me. Why don't you go lay down inside? I don't want you telling your father I kept you up all night. Yeah, I said, my voice sounding 1,000 miles away. I felt like I was swimming through glass, slow and morbid. Why don't I go lay down in the car? That way when we leave, you won't have to wake me up. No, her voice was stern now, harsh. You'll hurt your back in the car, Casey. Lie down on the couch. But you're my daughter, she shouted, her voice rising in the night air. When I tell you to go to sleep, you'll go to sleep, goddammit. Do you understand? I felt my breath grow ragged, felt the tears falling, but I was no longer in my body. I was made of clay, soft and moldable, easy to smash and put away when you're done with it. My mom's arms were around me in an instant. It's okay, honey. Mommy's here, she said, like she hadn't been the one to shout at me, even as she led me into the abandoned cabin. Mommy's gonna make it better. You just need to lie down, all right? She laid me on the dusty couch and patted my cheek with one hand. Then she walked through the door onto the porch and into the grass. Here, kitty, 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 she began to coo. Kitty, 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 kitty. I needed to get up. I needed to run. I needed to get to the car, but my limbs felt heavy and weak. Like all it took was having my mother yell at me for my childhood fears to fall over me like chains. I tried to slow my breathing, to regain control of my body. I heard my mother's voice grow fainter and fainter. Was she walking away from the cabin? Was she walking into the woods? That's when I noticed the other sounds. Not the shuffling from before, not the sound of hiding. The sounds of walking, of careful, measured steps. I heard the boards creak in uneven rhythms, like something was slowly dancing, but it was all wrong. I heard the dry rasp of nails on peeling wallpaper. I heard laughter that sounded wet and dry at the same time. Something began moving against the back of the couch, and I stared with half-closed eyes as its shadow fell on the wall. In the outline cast by the dim little lantern, I saw something clamber onto the back of the couch. It perched like a gargoyle, but I could see that it was massive, the size of a man, balanced precariously on a wooden piece of furniture that groaned in protest. The thing above me emitted a low growl, like the rumble of a distant earthquake. I felt a heavy wetness hit my shoulder, and it began to run down my limp arm. I stayed still, not by choice, not because I thought it would keep me alive. In that moment, I knew that I was dead, that I would never see my dad again. I knew that I was going to be eaten or murdered or torn apart by whatever was drooling. And since I knew that to be true, I knew that there was no point in running, no point in fighting. It was over. All that was left was to accept that. "There you are, you nasty thing." My mom's voice cut through the tension like a flashlight through darkness. "Your friends are all out here. Don't worry, you can play with her later after she's had her nap." Through the slits of my eyelids, I watched as the shadow of the figure leapt heavily to the ground. It danced violently into view, spinning in slow, uneven circles before it came to rest on all fours by my mother's feet. It looked mostly human, but the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, the knees bent at impossible angles. As it followed my mom to the door, it looked back at me. Where the eyes should have been were spheres of black glass. The surrounding skin was mottled and scarred in horrible twisting patterns. As it smiled, I saw that where the flat chiclet teeth should have been were instead sharp splinters of bone that seemed to bleed freely, long rivulets of bloody drool spilling onto the hardwood. It cocked its head at me, the black glass looking into my soul. Then it leaned its head back, inhaled long and deep, and followed my mother through the door. "Good kitty," I heard my mother say from the porch. Her voice was drowned out by the sound of dry food being shattered by sharp teeth. The back door, that was all I could think of. That rusted screen door was my only hope of escape. I slid myself off the couch as quietly as possible, my knee landing softly on the tattered rug. I stayed low to the ground and crept around the couch, stepping only on the boards that looked steady. "She'll be so excited to meet you, pretty girl," my mom said, still cooing to the thing on the porch. "And I know you'll be happy to see her, too. I promised you more wet food, didn't I?" Once I reached the screen door, I took a deep breath. The door had been loud when my mom had opened it earlier. Looking at the rusty springs holding the door closed, I could only hope that they had been the source. As I put my hands to the spring, a sound from the porch burrowed into my shaking bones. It was somewhere between a howl and a gasp, the sound of air running over broken windpipes. A song I didn't want to hear. It spoke to a deep, ancient part of my brain. It told me to hide. Shaking worse than ever now, I pulled at the spring just enough to pop it off the screw, holding it to the door. Then, my breath still, I pushed the door open and hoped for the best. It didn't make a sound, at least, not over the yowling on the porch. It swung open in silent invitation to the darkness. All that panic, all that fear wouldn't let me be careful anymore. I could see the nose of the car in the carport, could practically taste the dust covering the tires. I couldn't wait. My feet were quiet as I ran through the grass, but the second I stepped onto the gravel of the carport, the porch singing stopped. "Cassie," my mother called. "Honey, where are you?" In moments of true panic, I've never experienced time moving faster or slower, like people always describe. For me, things just start happening all at once. In my mind, there's no delineation between the moment I pulled the door open, the moment I scrambled for the keys, or the moment I snapped the car into reverse. They all happen simultaneously, like photographs, spinning in open air. As I changed gears to drive, however, I remember my mother standing in front of the car. The headlights played across the fabric of her dress. The dust kicked up by the car obscured her and the half-dozen creatures flanking her on either side, and in her eyes I saw real hurt, a genuine sense of betrayal. "What are you doing?" I saw her mouth. I didn't answer, in flagrant violation of the 3 months I had before I could drive a car without a guardian present. I tore down the driveway and away from this madness. I took every curve inadvisably fast, feeling the inertia of the car trying to buck me every time. I drove so fast that the cloud of dust behind me quickly obscured the house from view. Good riddance. I was almost to the main road when I caught sight of the thing out of the corner of my eye. It was one of the creatures, the one from inside the house, loping easily alongside my reckless driving. Its glass eyes weren't looking ahead of it, however. They were locked on me, and as it stared me down with its smile, I knew one thing beyond a shadow of a doubt. I had only imagined that these things were human, maybe deformed or mutated, but still human. Even driven insane with pain, a human could be reasoned with, empathized with, on some level. But these weren't humans. They had never been humans, not by a long shot. In that smile gleaming with blood, in the contortion of muscles where eyes should have been, I knew that these were something else, some other. That wasn't the shape of a human becoming an alien, but of something alien trying to become human. Only it had gotten the details wrong. I exploded onto the paved road and took off in what direction I thought the highway had been, keeping an eye out for the creature. I saw it pacing along the rooftops, tracking me through the flickering sodium vapor lights. By the time I hit the highway, the thing seemed to be gone. I couldn't be sure. I think that was when I realized that the tears were shattering on my thighs, that I was gasping in air through sobs. So I drove, not towards home, not towards anywhere in particular. I pushed the speed limit, trying to put as much distance between me and the awful, awful cabin as I could. It wasn't until I felt something buzzing at my feet that I thought about stopping. In the chaos, my phone had fallen to the floor. I grabbed at it and saw that I had a dozen texts from my dad and 20 missed calls. My tears changed then, no longer those of an escapee. They were the tears of someone about to be rescued. I pulled into a rest stop and called him, sniffling. I tried to explain, but before I could, he cut me off and asked where I was. I read him the address of the stop. "Tell me everything," he said. I could hear him getting into his Nissan. So I did. I told him everything. I know that in stories like mine, the teenage daughter always holds back details, so she isn't thrown in a mental hospital. But I didn't even think about that. I told my dad about the movie, about the tuna mac, about Mom saying that she just had to go feed some cats. When I told him about seeing the first creature behind the shed, I threw up in the passenger seat. When my dad eventually got to me, I fell into his arms and sobbed and screamed and shook. My father, the middle-aged IT professional with a bad hip, helped me like he had helped me when I was 5. "We're going to call the police," he said, running his hands through my hair. "We're going to tell them the important bits. She took you to a strange place and made you feel afraid, right?" "But how?" "I don't think we can explain the other parts, honey. But I don't think it makes much of a difference either way." I nodded. That made sense. We were halfway back home when the weight of the night settled over me, waves of tiredness washing me away to unconsciousness. I looked at the clock and smiled when I woke up. It was 7 a.m. "On the dot," I said, starting to drift away. "On the dot, kiddo, just like I said." That was a week ago. After we talked to the police, they sent a patrol car up to the cabin for my mom. When they got there, no one was around. All they found was an empty bag of dog food next to a bowl, with my mother's shoes neatly beside it. According to the county records, the cabin's been abandoned for decades. The last owner had died before the turn of the century, and the land deed was split between his children. The police talked to all of them, but None of them have any connections to my mom. They assured us that they're still looking into it, but I'm not holding my breath. Doesn't matter anyway, because we're leaving. The house is already listed. My dad's been doing online interviews for a new job in a new city. He stayed home from work all week, and he called me out of school. We keep the doors locked and the windows drawn. The revolver he normally keeps in a safe is always nearby. As soon as he can lock down a new job, he says we're booking our flights. We're getting the hell out of this town, from my mom and from those monsters. In the meantime, we're sleeping in the family room. I sleep on a pull-out while Dad sleeps in the love seat. He's watching over me. I can't wait to leave, though, because sometimes, as hard as he tries, my hero falls asleep, and sometimes when he does, and I listen really close to the silence, I can hear that awful, awful singing. And every night, it's getting a little bit closer.
Listen to that rain. It's really coming down out there. Puts me in the mood for another hot drink. Maybe some tea. Maybe I'll go brew a little while you guys are waiting for me to come back. But I'll leave you with another great story by a favorite of the channel, Maleficent Bag 1062. So, while we wait for our tea, let's hear about why it's unadvisable to stare into the void.
Have you ever stared at something so long that somehow time seems to fade into obscurity? What feels like mere seconds, in reality has been minutes. Well, me neither. That was until I first saw the void. I can't explain what it's like or how it feels, but it's something that can only be sensed, like when staring at the corner of your room in the dark. You can sense something is there, but you can't see it. You just know. That's how the void makes you feel. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up, while your eyes just gravitate towards it, unwillingly. It all started when my girlfriend got her first apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small one-bedroom in the middle of the city. She was excited, and I wanted to be supportive. So I did my best to show my adulation on her starting this new chapter of her life. I was on a break for the semester and was coming back home. Me and my girlfriend had done our best to make a long-distance relationship work, and both me and her were beyond elated to see each other. But, more importantly, she was eager for me to see her apartment. As soon as I got home, I told my parents hi, ate a delicious lunch my mom prepared for me, something I was craving all semester, and headed to my girlfriend's. Arriving at the complex, I was taken a bit back. The place was guarded with security that was armed. They swarmed around the perimeter, guarding the entrance. As I approached closer, I could see the armed guard begin to look me up and down, and before I was able to get a word out, he interjected. "Sir, no soliciting. You must leave the premises," the oversized man told me. The demeanor of the guard left me a bit bewildered, thinking perhaps I had the wrong place. I pulled out my phone to double-check the address, and to add to my confusion, it was indeed the right place. "Sir, please leave the premise," the giant man once again said. Still confused, I did my best to mutter out a coherent sentence, feeling intimidated by the man brandishing the rifle. My girlfriend lives here, Kimberly. I'm here to visit her. She lives in 4B, I told the stoic man, my voice shaken with apprehension. The guard remained silent and unmoving, all while staring at me intently, and several seconds passed by before he spoke. He radioed to whomever was on the other side of the receiver. "You're good. Please enter," the man told me, while now brandishing a bit of a smile, or perhaps a smirk. I gave him a little smile and walked past the guard as I entered the building. Something about the entrance, other than the usual circumstances, felt off. I could hear the most abnormal humming penetrating from the walls. I ignored it and walked towards the elevator, still jovial at the revelation of seeing my girlfriend. Approaching her door, I could still hear the humming engulfing me, as if a giant motor was filtering air. I knocked on the door and stood with anticipation. As Kimberly opened, all the worries that had inundated my mind evaporated into a cloud of emptiness, and all my attentions were set on the most beautiful woman in the world, my girlfriend. "Hey," Kimberly shouted, while jumping into my arms. I didn't even have a chance to respond. My voice was silenced as she showered me in an endless sea of kisses. She quickly pulled me into the apartment, continuing to chatter on about how she had been and how life was coming into place for her, but mostly she was talking about the apartment. As she walked me around for the grand tour, which only took about a minute, her rant continued on without a pause, and as my mind gradually began to drift a bit, my eyes locked onto her balcony. "You got a balcony?" I asked, with a bit of enchantment. "Oh yeah, I forgot to show you. Come have a look," she said, grabbing my hand and pulling me outside. I was a bit disappointed. I was thinking perhaps she had a scenery of the skyline. Instead, it was a direct view into the courtyard, a view she shared with all her other neighbors. I looked around at what seemed to be an endless sea of balconies. Staring at all the apartments above and below me was making me a little dizzy. Whoa, I didn't realize the complex was so big. "How many floors are there?" I asked, astonished. Kimberly just shrugged her shoulders, dismissing my question, and started pointing to her neighbors, gossiping about who she suspected to be a weirdo. My eyes followed her fingers, seeing that most of the balconies were vacant of anyone, but we only saw one person. It was a woman, just standing still and unmoving like some statue. She was leering down at the courtyard. That caught my attention, since she was positioned in such an odd way. I looked down to see if I could make out what she was seeing, but to my dismay there was nothing. "What's she staring at?" I asked rhetorically. Kimberly abruptly stopped talking and realized who I was referring to. "Huh, I don't know," she told me, practically dangling over the top of the guardrail as she tried to figure out what the lady was gawking at. "Damn it, Kimberly, be careful," I said with frustration, pulling her back over. She stared at me curiously. "This whole place is a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, what's up with all the security guards outside?" I could see Kimberly's charming eyes drop with disappointment due to my criticism, her arms grasping at her waist with frustration. "So you don't like my place? Thanks. Those guards are here because some politician's kid lives here, or something like that. Honestly, it makes me feel safe," she told me, as she turned to walk back inside. I felt a knot turning in my guts, knowing that I'd hurt her feelings, so I approached her as she was still turning away from me and embraced her, kissing her neck. "I'm sorry. It's a great place. I guess it's just weird being back. I don't know," I said as I caressed her tenderly. She turned and looked at me with those enchanting emerald eyes. I could feel my heart skip a beat when she smiled. As night progressed, I tried to brush off the weird encounter with the balcony and just enjoyed myself with the love of my life. As we watched movies, I stayed the night and found it difficult to sleep. I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling as my girlfriend breathed deeply in her slumber. It was that humming. I could still hear it. I got out of bed and walked into the living room, grabbing at my head, feeling an intense pounding permeating. The sound seemed to be coming from outside. I walked towards the balcony cautiously and slid the glass door open, the moonlight showing the complex in a vibrant blue tint. I stepped out onto the balcony, hoping that the fresh air would relieve some of my anxiety. Instead, I was presented with the most frightening sight. The lady from earlier was standing on the same place, staring down at the courtyard. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I asked, directing my words towards the woman. She remained still and unresponsive, the surrealness of the situation sending a chill down my spine. That's when my caution morphed into a bit of terror. Through my peripherals, I noticed that there were now more neighbors on the balcony, all standing in that same emotionless stance. I turned to get a closer look at the others and realized that they too were staring down at the courtyard. As I stared at them with disbelief, one man turned his gaze to me, catching me completely by surprise. His expression was riddled with pure terror, defeat engulfing his eyes as they glistened in the moonlight from tears. I could feel him whispering something to me from across the courtyard, and as my brain did its best to put the words together that he was mouthing, I soon realized he was asking for help. I stepped back, into the apartment, horrified, my retreating away from the moonlight balcony. "Hey!" I practically jumped in the air like a scared cat, my girlfriend having startled me. "What are you doing? Why'd you get out of bed?" Kimberly asked. I remained quiet for a few seconds, trying to recover my breath as it had escaped me, my heart still beating 1,000,000 miles an hour. "Sorry, I couldn't sleep. That humming was bothering me on the balcony." "Again with the balcony. Just don't go out there if it bothers you so much. What humming are you talking about? The air conditioning?" Kimberly asked angrily. I understood that she must have felt I was criticizing her apartment, so I didn't respond. We just went back to bed. The next morning, I went back to my parents' house under the guise of wanting to spend some time with my family. Well, at least that's what I told Kimberly. In reality, I couldn't spend another minute in that horrid apartment. Just thinking about what had happened last night made my skin crawl, and I could feel a wave of relief wash over me, knowing I was far away from that place, away from those people. Days passed, and it quickly turned into a week. My mother became curious as to why I was no longer spending time with my beloved girlfriend. "I don't get it. Summer's almost over, and soon you'll have to go back to school. Why don't you spend the last week with her? Or did you guys break up?" I didn't know how to respond. In all honesty, I hadn't even talked to Kimberly in weeks. In fact, she hadn't even texted me or called me for some reason that left me feeling a little bit left out. The feeling of being perturbed quickly morphed into one of concern once I had the revelation of perhaps her neighbors had gotten her. "Son, are you okay?" my mom once again asked, disrupting my deep thoughts. "Yeah, sorry, Mom. I guess I was sort of thinking about how fast the summer had gone by, and you're right. I'm going to go see her today, actually. We had a big dinner planned," I lied. No need to get her involved with this apartment nonsense, I thought. I reached into my pocket to retrieve my phone and nervously searched for Kimberly's number. I dreaded calling her, knowing what place she lived in, almost as if the complex could sense my fear. There she was, a finger press away from knowing if she was okay or not, but I waited and waited, time clicking ever so slowly, as I could hear my mother's footsteps in the background, almost urging me to dial. Click. The phone didn't even ring, it just went straight to voicemail. Somehow, in the back of my mind, I knew what had happened. The place wanted me to go there. It wanted me to rescue Kimberly. As I stood still, lost in my own contemplations, I couldn't explain anything other than divine intervention took control of my limbs, and with haste, I made my way out the door into my car. I was going to save the love of my life. Arriving at the apartment, I noticed the armed guards were no longer present. I didn't see any movement of life outside at all, in fact. The complex was desolated. I could hear that dreaded humming from outside, the sound that was getting louder. I almost regretted my decision to come back to this place, but I had to save Kimberly. I cautiously made my way up to her apartment, and to my dismay, the door was wide open. The apartment was absent of sound or any light, darkness protruding out into the corridor. "Kim, are you there?" I called out. I breathed in deeply, swallowing my trepidation as I walked into the apartment. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I wandered around, still calling out for Kimberly, and that's when I saw her. She was out on the balcony. She stood unmoved as her body cradled back and forth in one place, as her head was positioned down towards the courtyard. I quickly ran to her, grabbing her shoulders and turning her to face me, but her gaze was vacant. Her eyes glazed over. "Kim, answer me. What happened? Snap out of it," I demanded, as her tears began streaming down her face. She remained unresponsive, a bit of drool sliding down her chin. She was completely gone, and all I could do was embrace her, crying, wishing that she would come back. That's when I heard her voice. It was calling me to the courtyard. "Kim?" I whispered out, utterly confounded. I carefully looked over the balcony, my eyes crawling as it gazed down at the dark courtyard. All the neighbors were still in their same positions. That's when I finally saw it. It was something I'd never seen before, some sort of chasm that glowed. I don't know how I couldn't have seen it before. "I'm down here. It's beautiful. Come down here with me." Kimberly's voice told me. That humming, it was coming from that void, and now I couldn't look away, as I just kept staring into it. Kim's down there. I just want to be with her. I don't know how long I've been staring at it, but if you ever hear a humming, just know it's coming from the void, and whatever you do, don't stare into it.
Oh, looks like that one ended just in time. The tea's done. Be careful, though. It's very hot. While I add a little honey, and you be certain not to burn yourself, let's move right along to another great story. Brought to us by Proper Entertainment 3. Let's hear about a strange website called dreamstorm.com.
Everyone knows that dreams are strange. People often say they have deeper meanings. The details of your dreams vanish in an instant, leaving only faint impressions behind. I have to admit, I've tried to remember my dreams, especially back when I was in therapy after a bad car accident. My therapist suggested I log the details of my dreams to help with the healing process. I'm doing well now, but I remember searching online for websites that could help me remember my dreams more clearly. Like those who seek to experience lucid dreaming. That's when I came across a website I often visited called dreamstorm.com. It started when a friend messaged me asking how I was doing. I replied and asked if he knew of any websites that could help me with dream recall. About 12 minutes later, just as I was heading to the fridge for a snack, he finally responded. Dreamstorm.com, he wrote, mentioning he'd seen it discussed on a subreddit. He said it was weird, but might be useful for my problem. I clicked on the link he sent, and it opened a forum website. The site featured several videos linked to YouTube, mostly about healthy sleep habits. The design was reminiscent of Reddit or 4chan, yet it felt oddly comforting. The background was gray, and the website's logo was a brain with a pentacle in the center. The symbol surprised me. I thought my friend might have sent me to some weird occult site, but I decided to check it out. Each thread had a different topic related to dreams, but some were a bit off. The first thread I clicked on was about illustrations people had made based on what they vaguely remembered from their dreams. As I scrolled through, I saw a series of drawings that made me feel increasingly uncomfortable. I'll try to describe the illustrations as best I can. Blind Pig Jim. The illustration was drawn in a sketchbook. It depicted a tall, lanky, shirtless old man wearing a mask that resembled a pig's face. The background featured a series of houses in a surreal landscape, with the sun displaying a disturbingly realistic face. The artist commented, "I had a dream where I was being watched by this guy in a pig mask. The sun was always singing a strange song about flowers. Every time I walked into a house, it was empty, except for a jar of human eyeballs in the center." Window watchers. This artwork was unsettling, to say the least. It showed a small sketch of a bedroom from the perspective of somebody sitting on a bed. The room contained various objects: a dresser with knobs replaced by staring eyes, a tall lamp in the corner. At first, Nothing seemed unusual until I noticed, thanks to the comments, a man standing behind the window, staring with huge dilated eyes and a sick, perverted smile. The artist didn't provide a proper comment, just a poem. Window watcher, passing through, watching you sleep is all he do. He picks a friend, I wonder who. Close your blinds, shame on you. You're gonna make him feel so blue. Oh, so sad, boo-hoo-hoo. God is here. This was more of a doodle. It depicted a man standing in front of 3 obelisks that seemed to stare at him. Above them was a singular being, distorted by scribbles, with clouds of smoke presented similarly about him. There was no comment, and I assume the title served as the description. A lot of these illustrations were disturbing, but those 3 stuck with me the most. As I scrolled through the threads, I noticed several people describing similar dreams, which only added to my discomfort. Feeling unsettled, I closed the website and shut down my computer. It was already around 2 or 3 a.m., and I realized I'd been exploring the site for quite some time. I climbed into bed, hoping for some rest, but as soon as I drifted off, I found myself back in my chair. I walked towards my bedroom door, but when I opened it, my house had transformed into a cold concrete staircase. I ascended the steps, feeling a growing sense of dread, until I reached a red metal door. I grasped the handle and tried to open it, and suddenly I woke up. I couldn't move for a while after waking up, struggling to process what might have been behind that door in my dream. Eventually I got out of bed, turned on my computer, and went back to the website. As soon as it loaded, I found one of the threads and posted about my dream. After a few minutes, somebody replied, saying they had experienced something similar. However, instead of the red metal door being at the top of a staircase, it was in their house. Several more people began commenting on my post, sharing their own stories about the red metal door. I kept scrolling through the forums, delving deeper and deeper into every thread, trying to understand what my dreams could mean. It wasn't just about other dreams. What did mine say about me? I continued until I encountered a thread titled Sigmund AVI. I clicked on it and saw that most of the posts were about nightmares, many with accompanying videos. There were too many to describe in full, but here are the ones that stood out. Melody AVI. The video was set at night in a playground. A faint, melancholy groaning could be heard, as if someone or something was singing in pain. The camera panned across the playground, then focused on a colorful structure. There, a creature with a mutilated face stared directly at the camera. It looked like a man whose neck had been twisted and mangled, with no eyelids. The video ended abruptly with the creature's face filling the screen, sending chills down my spine as I stared at it. Wish Watch, MP4. The video began with static, then cut to a clip of a person sleeping in bed. The cameraman silently watched the person for about 12 minutes. As the person began to stir and wake up, the cameraman suddenly fled and the video cut off. The comment section was flooded with links to the window watcher drawing, repeating over and over. Some commenters dismissed the video as a reenactment of the artwork, but something about it felt disturbingly real to me. Sadwalker, AVI. The video wouldn't play. I tried multiple times, but it remained stuck on the first frame. A disfigured man in a trench coat and a fedora, standing on a dark street. The comments explained that the video was broken, likely taken down by the original poster, but the corrupted file somehow remained online. One commenter who had seen the video before it was removed described it as showing the disfigured man walking down the street and eventually killing a dog in a blind fit of rage. I was relieved I didn't have to see the gore described by that commenter. I wouldn't want to witness such a thing. Several of these videos were somewhat related to dreams, but most were simply disturbing. I continued exploring the threads of the forum, skipping the videos and reading several posts about dreams, some more unsettling than others. Eventually, I decided to leave the forum and return to the softer, more popular section of the websites that weren't as horrifying as Sigmund AVI. I was about to go back to the illustration thread when I noticed something off about the website's logo. It usually featured a pentacle inside of a brain, but now it displayed a Greek letter instead. I clicked on it, and a black background appeared on my screen, with the same red metal door from my dream. I moved my mouse towards it and clicked it. The page took me back to the website, but now it's different. The forums were all gone, replaced by a single message, undergoing repairs. I decided to close the window and turn off my computer. It was about 5 p.m. I went about my day, but a few hours later, I returned to my computer and found that the website was gone. Everything had been deleted, and I searched for any information about what had happened to dreamstorm.com. I checked other websites, trying to find anything about it, but several people commented that it had never existed. I even asked my friend about it, but he claimed not to know what I was talking about. I showed him our message as proof that he had sent me the website, but he just gave me a confused look. The link he had sent wasn't to dreamstorm.com, but to a Wikipedia article about dreams. If anyone has any information about dreamstorm.com, please let me know as soon as possible.
One last story for you, and then I think it's time for us to say so long once again. But don't worry, because we're definitely going out on, well, maybe not a high note, but a loud note nonetheless. This one comes to us from an old friend called Scare in the Box, and many of you will remember it as a very unpleasant story, but definitely a fine bit of body horror. And that's right. Today we're reading Dripping and Dropping.
At first, I ignored the dripping sound. I figured it was just raining, but the drip, drip, drip just wouldn't stop. No matter where I go, it's there. I've searched the whole house by now for the source, but no matter where I stand, it seems to be coming from over my head. I called a plumber. They should be here between 10 and 2. I'm really hoping for 10. Sound is driving me crazy. I try to distract myself with music, but no matter how far I turn the stereo up, the dripping is still there. Incessant. Just loud enough to form a backbeat. Drip. 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 The plumber showed up. His eyes are red like he hasn't been sleeping. I explained the problem and he goes to look. Yeah, I've been hearing the dripping for a couple of days now, the plumber says from under the sink. The leak clearly isn't there, but I don't say anything about it. He's the plumber, after all. It says so on his name tag, along with his name, which I'm certain he told me, but I must have forgot. The plumber keeps talking. I'm starting to think it's some kind of tinnitus because the dripping's following me around. This drip does that? I admit. I can't seem to narrow down where it is. Well, it isn't here, the plumber says, coming up from under the sink. His eyes look even redder now. I got a few more places to check, though. I follow him around the house. He weaves a bit drunkenly, and I start to wonder why his eyes are so red. Just my luck. Get a plumber who can't find the drip because he's hitting the bottle of scotch. Been getting a lot of these calls, the plumber slurs. You're lucky we could get you in. Seems like everyone has a leak they can't find these days. Just find it, I say. The tapping, dripping, dropping, clanking sound makes it hard to be patient. Maybe that's why the first thing I thought when the plumber dropped to the floor was, I'm supposed to be thankful for this alcoholic showing up. My second reaction is better, as it clicks with me that something's seriously wrong with this guy. I sink to the floor beside him and reach out. I call his name, which I only know because of the nameplate on his chest. I've forgotten his name even as I say it. He doesn't respond. Little pool of blood spreading on the floor from his nose. The next bit happens in a whirl. Call 911 and the paramedics show up. One of them has bloodshot eyes, and I find myself staring at that rather than at the corpse on the floor, because by then I know the plumber's dead. He hasn't so much as blinked since he fell to the floor. They take the body away and leave me with a little pool of blood slowly congealing on the tiles in my kitchen. When I head to get some towels to clean it up, I pass the bathroom mirror. My eyes look a little bloodshot too. Probably the dripping. Makes it hard to sleep at night. Though, maybe it's time to pick up a bottle of scotch myself. I'm not usually a heavy drinker, but something to help me relax a bit. The next day I'm sitting in my living room with the TV blaring in a doomed attempt to drown out the drip, drip, drip. A report comes on the news that catches my attention, mainly because I recognize the plumber's face. The familiar plumber's snapshot is alongside a few others on a screen cap. The details of the report are hard to concentrate on as the drip, drip, drip seems to wind in among the calmly stated facts from the news reporter. But even with that, I managed to get the basics. The people on screen, including my plumber, are all dead. That part makes sense. The rest doesn't seem to compute properly, even with my limited knowledge of biology and how the body works. The findings in his death don't feel right. When they brought my plumber to the hospital to examine him, there was no brain in his head. His entire skull was filled with blood. He was the first. Lucky me to have the first die in my kitchen and leave a pool of blood. The others are victims that have come in since his death. All dead now, according to the newscaster, with her perfect lipstick and her wide blue eyes. The CDC's been called in. The newscaster gives a list of warning signs of this new disease. I barely hear most of it because it sounds more like a practical joke than a real thing. The only thing I really pick up on is the dripping sound. The dripping in my own head wouldn't let me tune that factoid out. Apparently all the victims heard a dripping sound, which the doctor and the scientist are proposed was the sound of blood dripping into their empty skull, filling the place where their brain was supposed to be. I turned off the TV and headed upstairs to bed, despite it all just being the middle of the day. People can't live without brains. Even I know that. Despite being unreasonably exhausted, trying to sleep is hard with the dripping sound. I can't escape the repetitive noise. I shut my blinds, trying to blot out the sunshine outside, and climb back under the coverlet. I find myself mulling over the TV report. It can't be real. How could they even know that the people had empty skulls prior to the dripping? Were people coming in to report this to them before dying? And who would have ever thought to look for such a thing? Outside the window, the sound of a siren screeches by, fading into a keening sound in the distance. By the time I finally drift off to sleep, I've convinced myself that I imagine the entire report. I dream that I'm trying to find a leak in an old basement that smells like mold and copper. I find blood dripping down the wall instead, and realize I'm standing in a puddle of it. By the time I get back to the basement stairs, it's up to my knees. Morning comes, and the dripping sounds louder, more like the plop of water in a full bathtub than droplets hitting the porcelain. Like my brain's filling up. Except that thought comes directly from the news report that I must have dreamed. I go downstairs and turn the TV on again to make breakfast. There's a dried pool of blood in the kitchen floor. I should have cleaned that up. I'm gearing up to do that as I eat some dry toast for breakfast. But the news comes on and distracts me. Pictures of the local hospital and a new set of faces fill the screen. I see a number, but I don't recall the death total a moment later. Must be hard to remember things without a brain, I tell myself. I don't listen to the newscaster's report this time. Instead, I pick up my smartphone and do my own research. The report I heard was real, or at least the report really happened. Lots of people are calling the disease made up and falsified, but I noticed that everyone from where I lived is scared. There are more reports of deaths, wives telling what happened to their husbands, children saying what happened to their parents, and every story starts with that dripping that no one else can hear. I do some research on the doctors who are putting in this insane claim. They were all respectable before this, and their reports still chill me in a way I don't expect because all of them are saying exactly what I thought. This shouldn't be possible. People can't live without brains, but they are. That makes me study the report carefully, searching for the underlying fact, even if those facts contradict logic. The body count's up in the hundreds now. Didn't take long. The disease seems like it takes about 4 to 5 days in total. Now I'm sure of what the sound in my head is. It's a drip, slow and steady, of blood into my empty skull, filling the space left vacant. Drip, drip, drip. No matter how much I study the report, there's no explanation for this phenomenon, nor why the people die when the empty space is full. But they do, and by inference, that means I will too, unless I can figure out a way around my looming fate. I clean up the dried blood on my kitchen floor, overflow from the plumber's brain. He should have drained it beforehand and brought himself some time. How full is my skull? I'm 3 days into this awful dripping. I go out to my car and consider driving away, but the dripping would just follow me. When I go back inside, I'm thankful that I didn't leave. The TV tells me that the borders of the city have been closed. We're all in full quarantine for the rest of the world. Another fact sneaks in to frighten me. The death toll is up in the thousands now. And that's just the ones that have been reported and tallied. There are only 2 things the city's doing now: dripping and dropping dead. It strikes me as funny, and I laugh. I can see my reflection in the kitchen window as night falls. My eyes are a horrid shade of red. I wouldn't mind some scotch, but pretty sure that even if there were places open out there, they wouldn't serve me. No one seems to know if this is contagious, but no one's taking any chances. We don't know what the cause of this plague is, but the quarantine has people thinking that it can be contained. That means that we're spreading it somehow. No scotch in the house. I lock all my doors and bar the windows as night deepens. There are bodies in the street. I can't find a death toll online anymore. No one's doing anything akin to scientific research. I find several places where people outside the city are discussing what's happening. I try to leave comments, but my fingers don't seem to want to type anything sane. I can locate a few like me, typing similar comments. All we talk about is the dripping. The drip, drip, drip. But it started to sound like a ticking sound to me. After all, that drip is my life, ticking back to 0. In the middle of the night, I hear a gunshot fired, then another. Someone runs by outside my house, and I'm pleased that they don't fall down and die. There's enough corpses outside my house. When I survive this, I don't want these bodies to be my responsibility. No one out there is going to help me. Not those talking about the disease from their safe, unaffected cities, and certainly not the dwindling population of the city around me. I stare at my kitchen floor and think about the plumber. Ending up like him is hardly appealing, so I won't. His problem, I decide, was that he didn't have the information I do. He didn't know what was happening to him, so he couldn't address it. He didn't know that he didn't have a brain in his skull, and it was slowly filling up. My leg up is that I know these things. I wonder how we lost our brains and if we can get them back. But those are facts that I don't have. The people who came after me may have them, but I have to make do with what I know. And what I know is that my skull is filling up with blood, and I'll die. A smile spread across my face. I feel it stretching unused muscles. All I have to do in order to not die is not let my skull fill up. I head into the garage and dig in the tools there. I find my drill and bring it inside. Safety first. I wash and sanitize the bit, then I leave my sink faucet on. I figure I can wash and rinse the thing as I go in if it becomes necessary. Good thing I know my sink doesn't leak. I giggle a little. I'm getting silly. It's all the dripping, I guess. I tell myself it's hard to focus with the dripping, and maybe, just maybe, it's hard to think clearly with no brain. The best place to go in, I decide, is the dead center of the skull. I don't need to worry about hitting my brain, after all. I plug the drill in and put the bit where it belongs. I picture the blood coming out of the plumber's nose. Obviously, that doesn't work as a drain before death, but I'm smart enough to create my own drain. My head would never fill up. Nope, I'll just let that pesky dripping blood drain out the front. The back might have been a better choice. Not to mess up my face, but I can't properly reach back there. Forehead it is, I guess. I turn the drill on and press it to my forehead. You'd think it'd hurt a lot, but the truth is, it doesn't hurt all that much at all. After the first surprise jolt, it's more like a toothache. Nasty, but localized. And the knowledge it would be over soon kept me going. The drill bit pops through the other side of my skull. I feel it because the resistance is gone, and the drill just slides forward. I pull it out and tipped my head over the sink, letting the blood drain out and get washed away by the flow of water. I wonder who else has thought of this as I clean up bone fragments and blood from the kitchen. Then I wander into my living room. I don't turn on the TV. I can't hear it over the dripping anymore. People are screaming outside. I feel sorry for them. I figured it out. I'm safe, but they're still out there, in the worst of it. I go to the window and look out, peeling back the curtain. The world is fresh and new, vital. Looks redder than it did before. It's actually a little hard to see. Oh, should have thought of that. Blood is draining into my eyes. Not dripping now. But there's a lot of red. More than the tiny drips could account for. Can't see anything through the blood drip, dripping over my eyes.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to say so long. Oh, but don't be sad. We'll have many great stories tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. You know that whenever the rain comes down, or the winter wind blows, my fire and my roof are always yours to enjoy, here on Cozy Horror. Till then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.